here in Los Angeles, and we are going to be heading to just grab a little bite, maybe get a little caffeine. I need some caffeine. And we also had an interview on Pej's Recovery Corner. Pej is here. Why don't you tell me a little bit about today? It's a lot to unpack.
Well, I mean, I interviewed a friend of mine that really wanted to be on the podcast. He says he's in recovery. He says he's recovered, and in reality, like, he hasn't done fentanyl in a long time, which is great. He still smokes weed. He still drinks here and there, but smokes weed, I think, avidly, daily, like, whatever. And, you know, in respecting all paths of recovery, I see lots of different people that do recovery their way. And what they interpret as their recovery at the end of the day is their recovery. If they say they're in recovery, they are. Example, you know, when people are on MAT, medical assistant treatment, and they do Suboxone maintenance, you know, in some circles, that's not viewed as completely sober. However, some people feel like they're not doing heroin anymore, they're not doing fentanyl anymore, they're not doing opiates anymore. So now, just because they're on that particular substance, being Suboxone, they're not getting high. Like, they're not doing the thing that was potentially going to kill them. Therefore, it's harm reduction. They're part of the harm reduction movement. They're using a drug that's going to prevent them from dying. There are people that just smoke weed that used to do heavier substances, and because they have stopped doing those heavier substances but just smoke weed, they consider themselves in recovery. Again, another way of viewing somebody else's personal opinion of how they view themselves. Our buddy today, my buddy that I was interviewing and talking to, in listening to the way that he talks and his outlook on certain things, he's on one end seems very anti 12-step world, wants to try to look for other alternatives to recovery, and there are many. 12 steps works more on a vast scale, on a higher scale, but you know, a lot of things that he was also talking about, like, you can tell he's got a very interesting imaginative mind. It goes in lots of different directions, and sometimes he will talk a lot, and you almost want to hold on to every word, and it's hard to hold on to every word because he's thinking so much, his brain's going so fast. But I told him, I said, listen, bro, I think he sometimes thinks I'm judging him for his recovery because my style of recovery is different than his, right? Like, I have to be 100% sober. That's just me. Like, I cannot be on any substance. It's just what I've chosen for myself in my life. Therefore, I'm 100% abstinent. He himself said he doesn't want to be 100% abstinent for himself, and again, to each their own. Also, he talked about supernatural spirits when he was doing fentanyl. Like, there's certain feelings and thoughts and places that he went in his head and in his spirit and mind, to where he was like, there's a lot of evil that lurks within that realm, right?
What do you think about that? I mean,
you know, I don't doubt it for a second. Like, I really do think it's a very evil drug. I think methamphetamines is an evil drug. I think cocaine can even become a very evil drug. However, there are some people that use some of these substances, and it lifts their spirits, and there's nothing evil about it, at least in certain moments when they're doing it, right? Which then becomes a question of, can somebody do drugs and really enjoy it and tap into their spirit and see nothing wrong with it, as opposed to somebody that does the drug and it brings out the worst in them, and they feel evil spirits that bring them to their knees or bring them to a point of no return, to despair. I think, you know, personally, like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to seek, because of maybe movies or books and things that I read, I would sometimes seek darkness, right? Like, I would go to a cemetery in Utah where there was snow that had fallen, and I'd step on the snow thinking I'm going to walk into the cemetery and maybe I'll feel evil spirits within this place because there's a lot of dead people that are buried here. And so when I would do that, suddenly my foot would hit the snow, and because it was hollowed out underneath it, it would make these crackling noises all the way across the cemetery. And I would like kind of freak myself out and think, those are the ghosts, right? Like those are evil spirits, or those are spirits.
Do you believe in that stuff or no?
Listen, I'm not saying there's no such thing as ghosts. I definitely, throughout my life, saw certain things that were questionable, but nothing that was like pure evidence of that was a ghost and that's all there is to it. I have my mind made up. There's a lot of people that seek UFOs and they feel they've seen UFOs. Have I ever personally seen a UFO that potentially had an extraterrestrial in it? No, I haven't. I have not seen UFOs that have aliens that are flying ships. No. I've seen unidentified objects that seemed like something that's in the air that could be identified, right? It could be more than a UFO. It could be a plane or some kind of vessel that, you know, if a government agency was to look at it, they could identify it and see what exactly it is, right? Like, but to the human eye, it might really be a UFO, an unidentified object, right? So when I talk about like evil spirits, I've seen a buddy of mine that I knew from childhood, or from my adolescent period of my life, that got into meth at a certain point in his life. And when he did, I looked in his eyes, and he did not look like the same human being that I was friends with for all those years. I saw like almost skeletal, like demonic zombie look in his eyes, to where it just seemed like evil had taken him over.
What do you think about when you're doing drugs, or you're doing not even drugs, like certain things, you're feeding into your body and you're not feeding into like what's your soul, and you're not feeding your soul, which is why they say someone's soul or spirit is dead within them, because all they're doing is they're just feeding their like body. And so then
that's a very good question.
And so then you think about that, and then it's like, why does it seem like a lot of homeless people on the street, there's no one there, there's no soul in there, and they're just almost a body, meaning they're like a zombie on the street because the drugs have overtaken them. They're not feeding their soul. And so that's why it's like they say like body, mind, like spirit.
It's a very good question.
So, and then it's the three, and it's like, if you're, for example, if this is like, this is your body, and then your mind, and this is your soul, and it's like, you know, if you're, it's like a pendulum. If it's like only going on one side, it's only going to your body, then your soul is slowly like dying. And so that's what they mean by your soul is gonna die, and to some people's interpretation could be hell. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's true or not, but that can be the interpretation. Some people believe hell is on earth because you're on the street, you can't even eat, and low-key, you're not even a person.
Right.
So that's what I mean by
that within itself, what you're saying right there, it answers a lot of that. Like, speaking from personal experience, a person that did very heavy drugs that really were draining my soul to the point of me just being out of my mind and not being coherent, not being here on earth anymore, being in La La Land, if you will. And then talking about the homeless people that you see walking the streets. I used to say and I was one of them, right? Like I was a mutant. I wasn't of worldly form anymore. I was a person that was so enslaved to the drugs that when I would be out there walking the streets, it was aimless. There was no goals in life. There was no ambitions, no attributes. Like I wasn't really like going anywhere, right? And I was lost, and my eyes were sunken, and it was as if the drugs had overtaken me, and they really had overtaken me, and so there was nothing to live for anymore. Yeah, I've thought that many times. That's why I feel that when anybody, and I know a second ago you told me like if somebody has a glass of wine or drinks a little bit of alcohol, they can still be spiritual. I think spirit can be within any human being, but if we're looking for something that's going to lift our spirits, that's mind altering or mood altering, like a substance, I think it blocks us from actual, real, true spirituality. Like you don't see people going to church drunk, right? Like I understand, like they drink a little bit of wine because of Jesus's blood and all that stuff. Like, but it's not like something that they're getting blasted off of. It's representing something else religiously.
Yeah, because you're not fully coherent, meaning like your mind cannot be fully aware in the moment.
Yeah. So I personally, I can't use anything that's going to affect me from the head up. And when I have friends that say they're in recovery or they're sober, but they still do some substances, but not the other ones, like, I don't need to really question if that's true recovery. To each their own. For me, I wouldn't be able to do it. I cannot put anything in my body or mind that's going to affect me from the head up, because it'll block me from God. It'll block me from real recovery. It will block me from my own version of real recovery, as in like from sobriety. I'm not going to be 100% coherent. When I'm in a sober state of mind, it helps me to tap into the higher source, God, higher power.
Yeah, someone asked if you're an ex-drug addict.
Yes, I am an ex-drug addict.
Yeah,
Would the other person say, bro, you a dog?
No. No, we're not gonna.
We got some characters out there, man, I'll tell you.
YouTube. Okay, we're going on Facebook.